Okay, good morning, everyone. So we'll get started here today. My name is John Fisher from MassDEP. I'm our Deputy Division Director for Solid Waste, and I'll be running the Organic Subcommittee meeting here this morning. Thanks for joining us. I've put our meeting agenda up on the screen here. So I'll be providing some updates from MassDEP's program perspective, share those with you, and we should have a few minutes for Q&A and discussion around that. And then we have three speakers joining us from different local government perspectives around the state. So Jan Amin with the Franklin County Solid Waste Management District, Charlotte Milan from the town of Arlington, and then Laura Alves from the City of Boston Office of Food Justice, Nora Walker. A little bit different perspective. And all these presentations are kind of part of something that I'll be speaking to in my slides, where we're starting to reach kind of a little bit of a pivot point with our programs as we've been focused on large business and institutional food waste reduction and starting to shift our focus more to diverting and reducing food waste from smaller sources, including both small businesses and residents. So that will be kind of a theme of our meeting here this morning. So with that, I will get started with my slides. So some of this will be a refresher and a recap for some of you, but just want to make sure I set the context for this and make sure we're all on the same page about the information we're talking about. So for Massachusetts, like most states, food waste is the largest single material category of our solid waste stream. It represents just over 20% of our trash, which comes out to a little bit over 900,000 tons a year still being disposed of in our trash. And we estimate roughly, slightly more food waste from businesses and institutions in the trash than from residents. Our goal for 2030, and this is part of our broader solid waste master plan waste reduction goals, is to achieve overall food waste reduction of 780,000 tons on an annual basis by 2030. And that's an increase of 500,000 tons on an annual basis, working off of a 2018 baseline. At that point, we're about 280,000 tons. And through 2023, our data shows us at capturing or diverting 380,000 tons per year of food material from disposal. I'll share more about that data and our progress in a few minutes. So when we think about goals and capacity, and we think about, how are we doing relative to the waste bands, and where is this 780,000 tons of food material that's going to be diverted from disposal? How are we going to get that? Where is that going to come from? So when we wrote the background documents for our waste ban regulations, we estimated that with the 2014 food waste ban, that and the direct supporting programs would enable us to get from a baseline of about 100,000 tons per year to about 300,000 tons per year of food material. And then we estimated that the 2022 ban would bring in about another 100,000 additional tons per year. So that means that the additional amount to get to our 2030 goal would either need to come from greater reduction from those business sectors or predominantly from smaller sources, including residents. So that's what we'll be talking about more here this morning. Our management capacity right now, we estimate at about 500,000 tons per year. That is somewhat of an estimate because a lot of the permitted capacity for our facilities that take food material is somewhat elastic for both compost operations and animal feed operations, but we estimate about 500,000 tons per year of current capacity for food materials. So enough to handle what we're generating and diverting right now, but not enough to support reaching our 2030 goals. So as we go, we're going to need more capacity to manage food material. And then the other thing to mention is that our capacity for food material is increasingly part of a regional interstate capacity picture as other states establish food waste disposal bans of their own, and businesses from those states start diverting more food material, and businesses come into those states and start establishing more anaerobic digestion, composting, or animal feed operations. We find that more and more food materials crossing state boundaries in both directions. So some of our operations take food material from other states, and some of those operations in other states take food material from Massachusetts sources. So again, the food waste ban, I think probably most people on the call today are familiar with this, but we started with a ban in 2014 that applied to businesses and institutions that dispose of 1 ton or more of food material per week. We've estimated that at about 2,000 businesses. And we started there because we felt those were the businesses that were most able to capture and divert food material from disposal as cost effectively as possible, and that by focusing on a smaller universe of businesses, we could also do a better job of getting clean material with less contamination going to our receiving facilities. We made pretty good progress with that through the years, and in 2021, we promulgated regulations that lowered the threshold of that ban from 1 ton to a half ton per week, effective last November. So we're reaching the point where we're now almost 2 years into that a ban with the reduced threshold. So that threshold is at 1/2 ton per week, and we've estimated that roughly doubled the number of businesses subject to the food waste disposal ban from about 2,000 to about 4,000. So this is a review of our food waste diversion data going back to 2016. That was really the first year we started getting kind of complete data that we felt comfortable with on a statewide basis. So you can see we have rows here for different categories of facilities that are accepting food material. And then at the bottom, we have a total that's rounded to the nearest 10,000 tons. So you can see for the most part, steady progress, with the exception of a little downturn in 2021, which we believe was due to the basic upheaval of commercial and institutional food service resulting from COVID. We've seen it, tick back up again in the last couple of years, though we also realize we need to continue to progress and to increase this diversion and reduction of food material going forward in order to be able to meet our 2030 goals. This is another way that we're looking at our progress, and this is, of course, focused on business and institutional food material. So going all the way back to 2014, we've been working with our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program. I'll speak more about that program in a moment, to gather data from companies that collect separated food material and gathering data on the number of customers that they have. And we've seen that number grow more than double from 2014 up to about 3,100 businesses in 2022 and 2023. Again, you can see a little bit of a downturn there and then a bump back up, but also somewhat of a plateau in the last couple of years. And of course, we'd like to see that continue to grow a little bit more, as we want to ensure both compliance with a half ton per week threshold, but also, of course, capturing and diverting more food material from disposal. So a couple of things that are important to understand about the food waste disposal bans in Massachusetts. So the way that businesses and institutions comply is that they do not dispose of a half ton or more per week of food material in the trash. That does mean that they can still dispose of some food material in the trash and still be in compliance with the ban. They just can't dispose of a half ton or more per week. And businesses and institutions can comply through any combination of these approaches: waste reduction and prevention, just preventing wasted food to begin with, food rescue and donation, use of on-site systems, or working with a hauler to send material off-site for management. And then another important nuance when we lowered the threshold from 1 ton per week to a half ton per week is that businesses and institutions that had been in compliance with the 1 ton per week ban may need to re-examine what they're doing to ensure that they're in compliance with the half ton per week ban. Because say they were disposing of 3/4 of a ton of food material per week, they would have been in compliance with the 1 ton threshold, but not the half ton threshold. That's another important nuance. So this, again, I've shared this in prior meetings, but just kind of a refresher about the scope and applicability of the commercial food waste disposal ban. For chains with multiple locations, the threshold applies per location, not for the chain total together. If you have multiple businesses together and they're sharing solid waste disposal services, like sharing a waste compactor, for example, like at a shopping mall food court, for example, those businesses would be considered together as one food waste generator. So perhaps those businesses individually would not be generating a half ton per week for disposal, but perhaps collectively they are. A school system with multiple locations, this follows the model of a business chain. So the food waste disposal is determined on a per location basis. So if you have elementary schools, middle schools, a high school, each of those locations is considered separately relative to the food waste ban. Packaged food is subject to the ban. It's not exempt. Although some material can be managed by our depackaging facilities and some cannot, we do have the ability to write waivers that allow temporary short-term exceptions to the ban for certain loads of material that just are not viable to go to any of our diversion outlets. And then how does the ban apply to dormitories or retirement communities? So the ban does not apply to residential food waste. So if you have, say, a retirement community that's got apartments, the food material from the residential side of that business would not be subject, but say they have a dining room and a kitchen and they serve meals, that would be considered a commercial food waste and would be subject to the ban. Same thing with the dormitory at a college. College dining hall and food service are subject, but food scraps from students in their dorm rooms would not be considered subject. And we do have a more detailed Q&A document up on our website, which I always encourage people to take a look at, and we're always happy to add to it if there are questions that come up that we have not adequately addressed. So inspections, compliance, and enforcement. So Massachusetts waste ban regulations, they're set in our solid waste disposal regulations. And that means that they get implemented at the solid waste facility on backwards. So solid waste facilities each have a waste ban compliance plan. And as part of those plans, they have certain inspection and monitoring requirements where they need to have identify failed loads, communicate with waste haulers about those loads, and also track and record that information. And we observe that information when we do facility inspections. That is not the basis for enforcement, but we do use that to conduct outreach and compliance assistance activities. Then, as far as enforcement goes, MassDEP conducts inspections at solid waste facilities for all of our waste ban materials. And we issue enforcement when we observe loads with a significant amount of any of the ban material. And of course, for food material, we need to be confident that we're observing a half ton or more per week. When we do waste ban enforcement, obviously this is the case for commercial food waste, but it's also just the case in general. We don't do waste ban enforcement against individual residents. We will do it against a business, an institution, a government, could be a local government or a waste hauler as appropriate, but not individual residents. So this is just kind of important contextual information to understand. So what's been happening with enforcement of the food waste disposal ban? Well, first of all, we are inspecting a lot of loads of trash. We have been, and we're actually looking to ramp up those inspections. We've been increasing over the course of this year. We have issued to date 145 enforcement actions for what we call in the regulations commercial organic material. This is essentially food material. This may have changed slightly recently because we continue to conduct inspections and issue enforcement, but that's pretty much up to date, I think, as of last week at least. So when we do enforcement, a waistband enforcement, the first violation that we issue to an entity is what's called a notice of noncompliance. This does not include a penalty, but does require a company to get back to us with a response indicating how they're going to return to compliance and ensure compliance going forward. Then if we see a repeat violation from the same entity, we typically do what we call an administrative consent order that does include a penalty. And those penalties have, for food material, those have ranged from $860 to about $5,000. We've done 14 of those consent orders to date. We did hire 2 new waistband inspectors in the past year, and as a result of that, we've been increasing our inspections, increasing the number of loads of trash that we inspect, and we think we're shortly going to see significant increases in enforcement. And again, that's for food material, but that's for other waistband materials as well. And I think just the one other note I want to make on this slide, you'll see different numbers here. You'll see numbers about number of inspections, and then you'll see numbers about loads of trash inspected. So at each facility inspection we're inspecting many loads of trash, typically on average 20 to 25 loads of trash per inspection. So one inspection, equals about 20 to 25 loads of trash that are getting inspected. Well, what we'll also do during our inspections, or based on other data that we get, is we will issue what we call warning letters that are not enforcement, but do raise the compliance issues and need to comply with individual businesses. So that might be based on a load inspection that we do, where say we see some food material from a business, but we're not sure or confident that it's a half ton or more per week. We may send a letter versus an enforcement action in that scenario. And then we also send letters based on facility data and third-party data. And those are just intended to raise awareness about the waistbands, make sure businesses know about the waistbands. And also, we always include a referral to our Recycling Works Massachusetts program, which I'll mention more in a minute. Another thing that we've been doing that's a little bit different is we've been sending what we call a formal request for information letters. And we have authority to request information like this related to regulatory compliance in our solid waste regulations. And we've been sending letters to individual businesses in targeted sectors where we believe, based on our estimates, they may be generating enough food waste to be subject to the food waste disposal ban, and we don't know what they're doing to comply. So far, we've sent letters to about 50 companies with about 700 locations. So obviously, a lot of these are chains with multiple locations, like supermarkets or restaurants and places like that. So these letters require companies to get back to us with a response to indicate how they're ensuring compliance with the food waste disposal ban. We do follow up and track responses to these letters. And actually, if we don't get responses, we'll issue enforcement to a company simply for not responding to the information request. So far, again, we've sent 50 of these to companies that captures about 700 food waste generators, and we're continuing to issue more rounds of these on kind of a batch basis. These do take some time because we have to do follow-up and tracking of them. So we're doing it on kind of a batch basis as we go, typically about maybe 25 letters at a time. And as we go, we expect eventually to have sent these letters to pretty much just about every business that we believe may be subject with the food waste disposal ban. We're starting with the largest ones first and working our way down. So I mentioned a couple times our Recycling Works in Massachusetts program. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This could be a whole presentation in itself, but the Recycling Works program provides assistance in a number of different ways to businesses and institutions, certainly for reducing food waste, but also for any kind of recycling, composting, reused waste prevention initiative. And the assistance is available through the program website. Businesses and institutions can call or email for assistance, or the Recycling Works program staff can also go out on site and visit a business and provide assistance directly at a business location. And to date, the Recycling Works program has delivered assistance to businesses on more than 750 occasions. That number is continuing to climb because they continue to do that every week and every day. The Recycling Works program also has a separate initiative that provides assistance to compost operations. So either an existing operation or a company that's looking to start a new operation, we will provide the assistance of an expert consultant to go out and visit the site, work with the company, make recommendations on how both to ensure compliance with the applicable regulations and also to ensure that they're operating as effectively as possible, minimizing any odor or nuisance concerns from that operation. We've been running that for several years now, and we also deliver workshops and training opportunities through that program. MassDEP also delivers grants and loans through our Recycling and Reuse Business Development Grant Program and our Recycling Loan Fund. And for food waste alone, we've given 17 loans for about $4.5 million. We've given 17 grants for 1.7 million, but that number is about to change significantly. We're in the process of a new award round that we expect to finalize in November. And once we've finalized grant agreements with that next round of companies, we'll be announcing the next round of awards. We expect this to be our largest award round through the RBDG grant program to date. So we're excited about that, excited to share that soon, and that number will change significantly within the next few weeks. Okay, I'm going to get going here because I'm taking a little bit more time than I want to. I want to make sure we have time for discussion and Q&A as well as our other speakers. So this slide, the gist of this slide is that we're kind of at a pivot point with our program. We're continuing to focus on implementation of the food waste ban and continuing to work to capture more food waste and reduce food waste from large generators. So we'll continue to work on that. But we're also starting to shift our focus to smaller generators, and that includes both small businesses and residents. And that's a little bit of the theme of our meeting here today. And we'll hear from some of our local government partners in a few minutes about what's happening in a few communities around the state in this regard. And this is definitely for MassDEP kind of a pivot point in terms of our work with food waste. So speaking a little bit about residential food waste, just to set the context here a little bit from the statewide perspective, there are a number of different programs that MassDEP has focused on residential food waste. One is our Sustainable Materials Recovery program. We've given out about $1 million in grants related to food waste to date. This is another program where very soon we expect to have another grant round announced and some more grant funds awarded in this area. So hope to say more about that soon. In addition, we have our Recycling Dividends program. The way that program works is municipalities earn points based on implementing certain types of programs. And then based on their population size, they earn a certain dollar payment per point that they earn. And then those payments then get reinvested across eligible program categories. And the Recycling Dividends program across the points, there's 23 possible points across all sorts of waste reduction categories. Municipalities can earn up to 3 points for different types of food waste reduction and collection programs. And so far, in 2024 in particular, municipalities earned $320,000 in recycling dividends program funds from implementing these food waste programs. And that's out of a total of roughly, typically we award between $3 and $3.5 million a year total. And then from 2021 to 2023, municipalities report their program spending to us, and they reported spending a little over $600,000 of these RDP funds on different types of food waste programs. So this is, I think, a really great program model, gives municipalities flexibility about how they use this funding, and kind of enables this cycle of continual program improvement and growth. And reducing food waste is definitely a focus of that program. So this is based on data that got reported to us in February, and this is data reported for 2023. We have about 90 municipalities reported some type of food waste collection program, 72 with a drop-off collection option, 12 with a curbside option of some sort, and then 5 with a combination of drop-off and curbside. And those programs reported collecting a little bit over 20,000 tons of food scraps in 2023. This is another area where, you know, we're looking to continue to grow that year by year. And then another really important strategy and really effective, especially cost-effective strategy for reducing food waste is distributing home compost bins. And we have 167 communities that report selling home compost bins to residents. Typically, municipalities that do that offer the bins for sale on a discounted basis. I know that's what I do with my food scraps, and it's a great option because there's no collection needed. And I have kind of a built-in market for my own compost right in my own backyard. So it's a great approach where it fits. But we realize, of course, that doesn't work for everyone. And then we also haven't spoken about our Green Team program today, but this is a recycling and composting and sustainability education program for schools. And as part of that program, we do distribute kind of small pieces of equipment. And through the years, we've distributed compost bins to 140 schools to set up composting programs at schools. And then to note that a lot of our recycling and reuse business development grants have supported the infrastructure to collect food scraps from businesses or to receive and process those food scraps. But some of those grants for collection are really kind of helping to support the residential collection infrastructure as well. And then I mentioned the Recycling Works in Massachusetts Composting Assistance. We've so far delivered assistance to 65 different composting operations, including 10 municipal compost sites. So it's important to note that where municipalities want to take in food material at a municipal compost site, they're eligible to receive assistance and help through the Recycling Works program. And again, we have those training materials available. Okay, so as we go, and this is kind of the evolution that I'm thinking about here today, we're going to continue to target a lot of our grant dollars to food waste and reducing food waste. Really continue to work with municipal and regional government officials to continue to grow our access for residents to divert food material from disposal. We're thinking more and more about kind of smaller community scale compost operations where food scraps can maybe be managed more within a community where they're located. That's, among other things, that's a really good approach to try to reduce transportation and collection costs, which can make the collection as cost effective as possible. We'll continue to support schools that want to implement composting programs. And then we want to focus more on sharing information about how residents can prevent wasted food to begin with. There's a lot of good resources around this, and we'd like to start sharing that more through our outreach channels and through our school green team to raise awareness about how we can each reduce our own food waste to begin with, which is really the best approach of all and the most cost-effective approaches of all, and can help us all save money. And then I'm going to maybe circle back to this at the end, but For those of you who are familiar with our solid waste master plan, you know, in 2025, we're planning kind of a mid-course review and assessment of that master plan. And one of the things that we committed to look at was the potential of further lowering the threshold of a commercial food waste disposal ban. So some of the things that we're thinking about as we start to look forward to that discussion is, you know, how are we doing with voluntary approaches to some of the programs that we're going to be talking about here today? How are we doing with program cost effectiveness? That's really important when we think about what we're going to mandate on a statewide basis. What's the status of our infrastructure, both to receive material, but also to collect and transport material, and to be able to handle more? How can we do with a potential concern with increased contamination as we try to collect food scraps from more sources, and looking at our ability to inspect and enforce and ensure compliance with a disposal ban with a lower threshold. Those are all things that we're going to be thinking about as we look forward to that discussion. So just to set the stage for that a little bit. And then here are some links that I'm just going to gloss over for now, but we'll, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll be sharing these presentations, all of our presentations, as well as this recording on our website after the meeting. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share, and happy to pop my presentation back up if I need to. But let me pause here and just see if people have any questions or comments for me, and you can feel free to raise your hand. You can type something into the chat as well, and I'd be happy to unmute folks if that would be helpful. We do a relatively small group, so happy to do that. So any questions or comments on what I've shared so far here?
Hey, John, this is Janet Dominant. Sorry, I don't see how to raise my hand.
Okay. If you are looking to raise your hand, for me, the way that shows up is there's a bar of options at the bottom, and one of which is a heart that says react, and there's an option within that to raise hand. But why don't you go ahead?
Did I raise my hand?
Yes, consider your hand raised.
Right. Thanks for all that information. That was a lot. Really appreciate it. Two quick things that are related. One, in one of the earlier slides where you were showing the progress over the years, I think you said you started in 2016. The thing that that was going down that you didn't note was composting. So while anaerobic digestion's going up, composting is going down. And I just want to flag that, you know, again, could be a separate discussion, but to me, that is a flag, which is related to some of the later slides. I live in Cambridge, where we do have a curbside collection program, but I really think it is important to not conflate the term compost, because Cambridge, and I've talked to the Cambridge folks about this and will continue to do so, the Cambridge materials don't get composted. And I think it's really important, and not for semantic purposes, but for, you know, building a future where we are reducing waste overall and going from highest to lowest use of the diversion process. I really think it's important to have a clear, accurate, universal understanding of what compost, the noun, and the verb is. So just wanted to make that comment.
Yes, thank you, Janet. And that's a good point about that food waste diversion data slide. I kind of glossed over that because I was trying to go quickly because I had a lot of slides. But the two trends that really jump off that slide are the growth in anaerobic digestion, and like you said, the decrease in composting of food material. One other thing where we've seen a little bit of growth that's interesting is animal feed, and through the years that's typically been animal feed going directly to farms to feed animals, but we also have an operation that is taking food material and producing an animal feed product, which is a little bit different market and outlet. So that's kind of an interesting, different form of diversion. Some of the dynamic with composting from my perspective is we've had a number of compost operations through the years that have closed due to nuisance and odor concerns. And so while we have had some new compost operations come online, we've also had a number that, well, they've either closed or they've stopped accepting food scraps for composting. And I've talked a little bit about that Recycling Works Compost Site Technical Assistance Program. That's one way we look to support that. We also do through our regional offices our own inspections at those operations. But it's really important that as we go that these composting operations are well run, to ensure that they're not presenting other concerns. So that's some of the dynamic that's been going on around composting. We certainly think there's potential for composting operations to be well run and to produce valuable products and to have really important and valuable environmental benefits, but it's got to be done in the right way and in the right place, and that's challenging as in a relatively dense state. But we're certainly, I never think it's good to be too reliant on one type of facility or one type of technology. So we do hope to continue to grow that as we go, and I do think maybe more distributed, smaller sites are a good way of doing that. Let's see, is there a place where MassDEP is tracking where municipal residential food scrap collection across the state is ending up? So, yeah, so that slide we were just talking about tracks it by category. We also do have a link on our website or page on our website that provides a map of all the different locations in Massachusetts that are accepting food material. And if I get a minute later on, I'll pop that into the chat, share the link to that site. So that's the locations that we're aware of that accept off-site food materials. Those aren't necessarily the only sites that accept food material, but they're the ones that are accepting food material from off-site sources. And I see Charlotte's question here, the increasing food scrap category, the other. So those are, I believe there are two facilities that are doing deep packaging, and they are primarily accepting liquids that may go to anaerobic digestion, but that may also go to a sewer discharge from those facilities. So it's being diverted from solid waste disposal, but not necessarily to anaerobic digestion or composting. Oh, thanks. I thought Becky just put that map that I was talking about in the chat. So if anyone's interested, that link is in the chat. So that's a map it's a map and a list that has information, again, on the sites that we're aware of that are taking off-site food material. This is not necessarily all the composting operations that we permit in the state, just the ones that as far as we know, are actively taking food material. See one other comment in the chat from Amber. What is the reasoning behind separating schools by buildings? Franchises often are located across multiple towns in a region, but schools are all using one food vendor and sending waste materials to the same facility using municipal funds and resources. So I think the primary reasoning behind that was from kind of a collection cost effectiveness standpoint, is that we were looking at how much food material can be collected at each individual point or at each individual location. And that was very much a cost effectiveness factor with initial development of the food waste disposal ban. So that's basically what that reasoning comes down to. Now, I know with that said, a lot of schools are interested in setting up food waste composting operations, and a lot have done so. And, you know, we're really interested in promoting and supporting that and working with schools to grow those programs, and we'll continue to do that. But I think that was the reasoning behind the per location determination as far as that threshold goes. All right, so happy to take more questions and comments later in the call here, but I'm going to shift gears now, and I'm going to turn to Jan Amin. So Jan is with the Franklin County Solid Waste Management District, and Franklin County has rolled out several different initiatives relative to food scraps. So I'm going to turn it over to Jan and talk about the work that she's been doing in Franklin County.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here and share about the Franklin County Solid Waste District's organics diversion program. John just mentioned me, but I do have a very active coworker in the organics side of what we do, and that's Amy Donovan. Some of you may know her. So I want to make sure she gets credit. She's done a lot of work in our schools. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Franklin County, we're west of 495, we're the center of the county, or the old county seat is in Greenfield. And we're pretty close, the top of the county borders Vermont. So there were a handful of solid waste districts, particularly out here in Western Mass, that were formed back in 1989. And Franklin County is one of those. We currently have 21 towns, and people often think, oh my gosh, 21 towns, but we're really small. So only 50,000 people, which is probably smaller than some of your towns that you're working with. There are 17 transfer stations. 3 towns have curbside. 2 towns don't have any solid waste service. One of those towns, if you do the math, you realize that doesn't add up to 21. The town of Montague has curbside collection, but they also have a transfer station. So, you know, we're working with about a $2.5 million budget. Honestly, most of that, my other hat is sludge hauling, wastewater treatment hauling, and the majority of that $2.5 million is related to that. Okay. So of those 17 transfer stations, we now have 14 of them, which have some form of organics collection. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. I wanted to mention our brand new program in the town of Gill, which is a curbside town, but has developed a drop-off site for residents. We have also worked to get organics programs set up in public and private schools. We have a program to loan out compost event bins, and we're very active. We do all of the recycling and composting for the Franklin County Fair. And we also still sell backyard compost bins. So at the transfer stations, we currently have 3 different haulers who are serving those sites. Casella, Clearview Composting out in Orange, they're small. They actually haul and have a composting operation, and the Compost Cooperative. So I already mentioned Clearview Composting. That's one of our local facilities. We also have another facility called Martin's Farm in Greenfield. They've been around for decades, and some of the waste, some of the composting food waste is going there. Some of our composting food waste organics, it's hard to get the right word, is also going to Agawam, to an anaerobic digestive facility. So here are a couple of pictures about the three different options. And the picture on the top left, this is an old dumpster we used to have Triple T Trucking out of Brattleboro, Vermont. They've been purchased by Casella. And I put this picture in because I wanted you to see the sign. So we provide signage. It's basically the same sign for all of our sites, but we typically customize it. So the top line will say, you know, food and paper waste compost program for Deerfield residents or for Coleraine residents. So I just wanted you to see that the trash can is for plastic bags. If somebody happens to transport their food waste in a plastic bag, that's there. The middle picture is Clearview Composting. They're out in the eastern part of the county. They use those small barrels, are 15 or 20 gallon, basically trash cans in a wooden box. And then the top right is the Compost Co-op. They're in a few of our towns. They use carts. And this is at the Charlemont Shelburne Transfer Station. They use their RDP funds to buy a shed to store their carts. What we do is we help all of the programs get started. We do all of the kind of logistics, but we also customize those signs. We make them, we design, Amy designs and makes them, and then the towns are paying us. So this doesn't come out of our budget. We also create either a flyer or a handout for the transfer stations, so residents know with a yes/no list. And then we'll follow up with publicity, whether that's something in town newsletters or town website, making sure the town website has the proper information on it, or putting out press releases. This is just a quick view of what the sign looks like. So we do encourage people to put in meat and bones. We do currently allow and take paper products and BPI certified products. So this is just our classic sign that we use for all of our sites. I wanted to mention the Community Compact, which is a state program that a lot of people don't know about, and I just learned about it maybe 5 years ago. The Coleraine Transfer Station, which is our newest transfer station program, applied for received a $10,000 startup or a grant from the Community Compact funding to allow them to start up their composting program. That paid for the collection service. They bought, I don't know, like 200 sure closed compost pails and maybe 80 to 100 compost bins, which they gave out. So you can't, the only thing I know about Community Compact is municipalities can only apply every 2 years, and there's a whole bunch of best practices. So it's just something to kind of honestly easy money. The most exciting, the kind of new, you know, we've been doing this for 30, 35 years, but we're always looking at new programs and figuring out how to offer programs to all of our residents. So the town of Gill is a curbside program. They only have 585 households. The town administrator and I started talking about curbside organics in 2013 and just could not make it work financially. They're obviously not on a grid, you know, a town grid system. They're pretty rural and spread out. So recently this came up again. There was a lot of interest in trying to do something, and we decided to use a model that's used in other parts of the state and country, which is basically a drop-off location that has a lock, a combination lock that residents who sign up for have access to. Sorry about my phone. I'm the only one here today. So we designed the program. I worked with their board representative. We decided on an 8x8 foot dog kennel, which through Home Depot only costs about $1,200. So it's a lot cheaper than a shed. And we're using the Compost Cooperative, which supplies 3 64-gallon carts. We started this program just a couple of months ago, or a little month and a half ago. And what we did was, for those of you who don't know, this is like the second tip. Something I wasn't aware of, that the Postal Service actually has an every door direct mail program. And the town administrator knew about this. You can choose routes. You can choose businesses or residents. So you can put in the zip code, see all of the routes, delivery routes. Click on one, it tells you how many households are in that, or businesses and households are in that route. And then the postage is really, really cheap. So for I think 180 households in the first route, it costs about $60 to deliver it. The printing cost more than that. So we've used this. We sent a mailer out to the route closest to the drop-off center. It was 180 households. It had a electronic sign up, a link for folks to register. They got a pop-up message in an email with the lock, which is just the zip code, the first 4 digits of the zip code. They were offered a free Sure Clothes pail. And what shocked me was the sign-up rate. I told the select board I thought maybe they'd have 20 people signed up. And we're now up to 57. And that's just the first mail route. Next week, the remaining 200 and plus households will get a mailer, and I imagine it's going to increase. So I go every once in a while, Wednesday nights, before the pickup's Thursday morning, and of the 3 carts, people are kind of funny, as you know. So for some reason, people don't want to fill up 1 cart and then go to the next cart. So all 3 carts have food waste in them. And I would say they're filling about 1.5 to 2 carts a week. So we still have some capacity to add new households. But overall, I'm very excited about this. I just can't believe, A, it took me so long to think of it, and B, that we got almost 10% of the households without really trying very hard. So this is what it looks like. It's not complicated. It's really just a dog kennel. We have the 3 carts, which are lined. There's a sign zip tied to one side. I do plan to put up some kind of lower barrier, because obviously once we get snow, the snow will just fill in a little bit. So we'll put up some probably waist high, maybe just some corrugated plastic boards zip tied to the outside. So it's really great. And if you're out this way, let me know and we can take a ride. And it's in this big field. It's behind a town, one of the town buildings right on Route 2. So it's very convenient. It has its own parking lot. We set the time folks could drop off from 7 to, I think we said 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. So it's really almost 24/7 access. We have spent a lot of effort working with school systems. This is one of the first things that Amy did when she started 16 years ago. I really wanted her to get into the schools, make sure we had recycling and composting programs. So I'm pretty sure that all of our schools now have organics diversion programs. And what we do is I work with the schools to go out to bid. So when they're doing their bidding for waste services, I help them with that bid process. And of course, we make sure that it includes recycling and organics. Amy goes to our schools. She just cycles through the schools all the time, but anytime there's a new program, she will spend some time in the lunchroom. She'll do some student like a all school presentation, and is working with the facility staff, both the custodians and the folks who are managing the kitchen. Back in 2015, so I feel when I put dates on things, I'm like, wow, is it really 2015? Holy cow. Back in 2015, I worked with, we have 6 private schools, you may call them prep schools, in Franklin County, and I worked with all 6 to either start an organics program or expand their program. So for us, there's this idea that we're publicly funded and we really shouldn't help private schools, but they're creating a lot of waste. And so my policy has always been, we serve institutions and businesses, and if a business called me and wanted to know how to start organics, I would help them. So I consider private schools a business, and that was really a great project to get that going. We also have containers I mentioned for public events. So the picture on the left you're seeing is what are recycling and compost event bins. These are just corrugated plastic bins that fold down. So we loan them out at no charge to town events, whether it's a fair or old home days or road races or bike races. The picture on the right is at the Franklin County Fair. That's the Roundhouse. There's about 15,000 people who show up. I don't know how many vendors there are, but probably hundreds of food vendors. And these were carts we had the tech school build, these wheeled carts so we could roll them around and keep just for the look. We now have way more stations at the Franklin County Fair than recycling section, event containers than we have these metal carts. But this was just an idea of trying to make it look nice. The fairgrounds, you might be looking at the trash can in the middle of the drum and being like, ooh, that's kind of yucky. They just got funding to buy, excuse me, nice 55-gallon plastic, black plastic barrels to go on that. So, and Amy and her staff literally are there every day until probably 10 or 11 o'clock at night, collecting and sorting all of the recycling and composting. We also, we've been selling backyard compost bins since 1994. State DEP had a grant, Ann McGovern, we got this grant. And the only reason I know we sold 2,200 is because those of you remember Peggy Harlow. I have a hard copy letter from Peggy Harlow saying, congratulations, you've sold 2,200 bins and your grant is finalized now. So we may be up to 4,000 bins by now. We don't really keep track of the total. We do, because of the RDP incentive, we do have 16 towns who subsidize the price. We have kept it at a $25. We were paying $65 per bin, but the resident only pays $25. So the town is paying the extra 40. And we also sell the Sure Close compost pails. And some of you may have gotten these green ones. We love these green ones. They don't make them anymore. They're now tan, but it's kind of a archive picture we have. So we hope that the avocado ones come back someday. And that's the very quick overview. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions, and I'm certainly, people can contact me afterwards if you don't think of a question right now.
Thanks, Jan. So I was at a road race out in Shelburne Falls this summer. I think I used one of your bins for my banana peel, I believe.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah, we do loan those out to Shelburne Falls Road Race.
Yeah, that was great. Well, that was, I think, really interesting, and kind of, what strikes me is kind of the creativity of approaches and trying different things and kind of evolving that over time. I think that's kind of really interesting, the different approaches different communities have adopted around the district.
Yeah. And I will say, I know that we're very fortunate because this is our full-time job. Amy and I do waste management every day, full-time. So a lot of people, it's a part-time piece. And we've been doing it for a long time. So we really have been able to dig a little deeper and look at, how do we serve that community, or how do we fix that issue? So I do recognize we have some advantages that other folks may not.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right. Any questions for Jan about Franklin County programs? All right. Well, we can circle back here at the end as well. I don't see anything here. Let me double check. Okay. Well, thank you, Jan. I'm going to turn next to Charlotte Milan from the town of Arlington, and Charlotte will talk about the program that they've developed there. So turn it to you, Charlotte. think you just need to,
Okay, can you see my screen?
I can see it, but I think you need to maximize that window because we're seeing your whole desktop.
right,
That window is just showing in a portion of the screen.
Stop sharing and start again. Sorry.
Okay. I have it here too, if you like.
All right, I think I've got it. Maybe you should share it. I apologize.
I have the PDF ready at hand here, I think. Okay, is that coming up?
I apologize. I'm having a hard time.
Are you seeing my screen now?
Okay. I am. All right.
Okay,
Sorry
great.
about that, everybody.
So
Okay.
just let me know when to advance.
Okay. So thank you, everybody. I'm Charlotte Milan. I'm the recycling coordinator in town of Arlington. And as we all know, that's a very shorthand name for what actually happens in my role. And for those of you who don't know Arlington, we're a community of 45,000 residents, and we serve every household in Arlington with our trash recycling yard waste program. So that's over 20,000 households. We are an inner suburb, so we're right next to Cambridge, just outside of Cambridge. And we have mixed housing stock, a lot of apartments. And we are, last time I was in graduate school, I found from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that Arlington is quite a highly educated community. We have a lot, like 2/3 of our population work in government, education, or the nonprofit sector. And we are very well known for having neighborhood schools and are sought after as a community because of our neighborhood schools. So I'm starting with this first picture because it gives you a little bit of a before and after glimpse of where we started. Food scrap diversion is dear to me, and we do call it food scrap diversion here, exactly because of Janet's comment about what happened in Cambridge when they started their program. So we started off in 2015 with the idea of having curbside food scrap diversion because of the existence of bootstrap compost. But they were a little far away for our residents. They started in JP, I believe. So I started out, you can see the little insert picture, going to the farmer's market with a couple of bootstrap buckets and convincing people to come bring their food scraps to me at the farmer's market on a weekly basis. And then bootstrap would come and pick it up at Public Works. So a lot of the campaign was very much about preventing food waste, which, as has been mentioned before, is clearly the first step to reducing food scraps and finding a higher use for them. So fast forward to, so kudos to Bootstrap for being first in our area that was offering this service. And then fast forward to the larger picture, and that's what the front of Public Works looked like on a regular basis in around 2020. We had a real great uptick. So you can go forward, please. Thank you. So it was Garbage Gardens also, I should mention, that came and when they moved to the Boston area, came to our farmers market as well and started doing some direct marketing to residents. And that's when we really started to see residents considering putting out a bucket in front of their house for food scrap diversion. And I don't know if there are other communities out there that don't have yet the opportunity for curbside subscription services, but it's a great first step. Arlington does not have a municipal-wide food scrap diversion pickup, but we do have and have had for a long time an interest in gardening and interest in composting among our general public, and we've promoted healthy soil creation and backyard composting forever. So our little snapshot in the top is our website, where we have a food scrap diversion section that where we sell compost bins at the reduced rate recommended by MassDEP in order to get our recycled dividends points, which we super appreciate and depend upon. And then we, at public events, we've been promoting backyard composting for a long time. But has happened to a number of communities in this inside 128 region. We are seeing increased animal activity, rats in particular, but also really strong and talented raccoons. So backyard and voles and all kinds of things. So backyard composting can be problematic for some residents, and once rats move into a neighborhood, then it's really hard to get rid of them. So the Board of Health will even intervene and ask that people stop doing backyard composting. So this is all happening and becoming more publicly aware, the rat issues as well in the 2010s. So if you could go forward one more. What really one of the major shifts that happened in Arlington is happened as early as 2011, when one of our public schools decided to start food scrap diversion or composting on the school site. And that was a long time ago for that to happen. And they really set things in motion for the other schools. Schools talked to schools, and within 4 years or so, it became something that other schools wanted to do. But it does take some really intense champions, people who will really push this through to make things happen before it's a commonplace thing. So kudos to our school sustainability coordinator, who was just a volunteer at that time. So you can go ahead one more, please. We have we've come a long way since 2011 in that first schoolyard program, and we've moved to a we figured out at some point that there was the capacity with garbage to gardens, and was also city soil and black earth compost, including bootstrap compost, all available to work in Arlington, all willing to come out to Arlington to pick up food scraps. So we also expanded the idea from that residents dropping off their food scraps with me at the farmer's market to the fact that they could actually have food scrap diversion picked up at their house, or food scraps picked up at their house. And so by about 2017, it was time to name these programs and to start doing some real promotion. So we had a cute little outreach card for Kirby, our little curbside bin, and that that cool dragony looking worm creature was our iteration of Fido, food scrap diversion. And the program is called Feed Fido. And the marketing campaign was really that, Fido was a cute little vegetarian animal that lived inside a bin, and you could drop off your food scraps, but you had to be really careful. You didn't want to drop off plastics or things that would make Fido sick. And we definitely had some people after this campaign started thinking that maybe we actually had something in there eating the food scraps. It was very interesting. People use their imaginations in all kinds of ways. So what started out as a cute little marketing image and a way for people to really think twice before putting plastics in with the food scrap drop-off bins, that we wanted them to feel that there was a health or a safety benefit to being careful not to put plastics in, and it ended up making some people rather uncomfortable thinking there was something actually in our bins. So now we're in about 2018. Drop off of food scraps is a viable thing. We copied basically Project Oscar in Boston, and that's how we learn these things from town to town in this area. We also, our residents had been seeing the food scrap collections or the composting collection right over the line in Cambridge, and were really demanding of me, why can't we have curbside collection of food scraps in this side of the line? So that, I think, it goes again to how activated and informed and caring our population is, which, as Jan was talking about, not every community has that kind of motivated population, but I feel very fortunate to work in a community that does. So then it's time to expand our program. So this is what our programming, our marketing was for. And so then I have to justify it to the people who make decisions and provide funds. So I don't even want you to look at this spreadsheet. It's really a bunch of mumbo jumbo, garbly-gook. So I called it budget gymnastics. I had to make up all kinds of numbers and make all kinds of wild guesses as to how much food scrap diversion was going to actually happen, depending on how big we got, and how much that was going to offset our tipping fees at the incinerator. And so, I estimated that we would save $30,000 in tipping fees, and it was the curbside program was gonna save us money too. And in the end, so our food scrap at schools was also going to expand. And in the end, we were only going to spend $10,000 or so, and we were going to save all of this money. But really, you don't have to look at that, because it didn't quite work out that way, as you can probably tell by the tone of my voice. So you can go forward again, please, John. But I want you to see now some of the other things that come into play when you're trying to expand a program. We had started off with one of these bins, the one on the right. Again, Project Oscar was using I think it was originally a wooden bin, and then they moved to these super fancy Italian-made soft close containers for their food scraps. So inside this metal bin is a large plastic tote, like you saw in some of the other pictures, or what you're all familiar with from trash and recycling. But we really had to work with our health department to assure them that, because we had these smart and strong critters, that they weren't going to be able to get in. So we went with bear proof, or the kinds of metal containers that are seen in national parks a lot of the time. We started off with one at our Public Works, and this is after an expansion. We expanded to 3 at Public Works because so many people were using this. And we had signage. You can see the signage isn't very well kept up there. We do try to put right directly on the containers what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. During a big expansion of our Public Works building, we had to move these containers around over and over again, and only occasionally would residents call me and say, "Where did they go? Did you take them away?" Mostly people kept track of where they were, found them. We see people walking, biking, driving into this DPW parking lot to access the drop-off. And on our website, we provide a registration form, because we do want to know who's using this, but we're not tracking it in terms of only providing certain people any kind of a code. I think that's something that we considered early on. We've had absolutely no tampering with these containers. Once they get full, they're very, very difficult to even roll out. So those are just, people can just open them up. Anybody can use them. We actually have had very little reporting from our vendors on contamination, which is also amazing. And I consider this a wildly successful program because it is totally free and completely accessible. This really helps us with our multifamily residents whose landlord or whose, the configuration of their building just may not allow for a subscription, but also you know, this is the most efficient way to get a lot of people's food scraps mixed together. Arlington is also quite small geographically, so this is really in the center of town. But we added another location right along our bike path for those people who want to take their food scraps on their way to work, which a lot of people do. And we even started a third location that we don't advertise, which is a neighborhood location. Just that neighborhood asked for it, and we experimented with it. We had to really do some outreach to neighbors to make sure everyone was comfortable with it, and they were. So all of those 3 locations are all available to residents 24/7. We've only had one finger smashed in the lid there, and these are not ADA compliant. Those are the 2 things that I think really are an area of improvement that we could make. We continue to think of this as a pilot program, but it's I would say successful in large part because it takes very little management from me. Could you go forward one more slide, please? I will say that getting permission to locate these is something that is I think that we could all use some guidance with. My understanding is that for food scrap drop-off, it has to be town-owned property. So this is a slide from a presentation I made to the Park and Rec Commission. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to talk to your Park and Rec Commission. It's a very gatekeeping, an important group of people who keep our open spaces usable for everybody. But you want to locate these drop-offs, in my opinion, someplace where people are already on their way to or from something. This is a big park with a lot of ball fields and a playground that's at one end of our town. I'm still continuing to try to expand this program because I think of it as so successful, but finding these public locations that everyone will give me permission to do is my current barrier at this time. So permission is definitely something to think about when you're creating these programs to begin with. That's why starting at our public works building made the most sense. And we don't have a transfer station in Arlington. Okay, can you promote the slide, please? So this is another way that we can we've made this program really easy to use is by sending an email to people after they sign up for food scrap curbside collection, or I should say, this is the other program. This is the curbside collection program. This is expanded and easy to use because we make it very self-service. People get an email from me with my name and my phone number and my address as soon as they sign up for a subscription service. So it's very friendly. People sometimes confuse whether it's the town of Arlington picking up their food scraps or the company that's actually picking up their food scraps. This is the kind of container that was being used by both Garbage to Gardens and Black Earth Compost. Just recently, Garbage to Garden has successfully won a Medford's contract to do their municipal program. Congratulations to them. They're a great business to work with. And they sold their Arlington business, book of business to Black Earth Compost. Black Earth Compost has been a fabulous partner. So they copy me on an email when someone signs up for this kind of equipment. I set out a cart with a Sure Close bucket, which we love the Sure Close buckets, and a little 3-gallon bio bag, roll of bio bags inside it to create a kit. That's basically our sort of thank you. That's the tone of my email. Thank you so much, residents, for diverting your food scraps. Here's what you're doing to save the town money and save the environment, and you're putting this to much higher use. And residents do feel really good about participating in this program. It's such a win-win. I can't believe how many residents, I'm so thankful for all those residents who are willing to pay for this curbside program. We've looked into, this private food scrap subscription service. Not the only program that we really run is that we are giving these containers away. And that's where our recycling dividends program money has come in so helpfully. We have to order, you can see the picture on the left, we have to order 6 pallets or 500 13-gallon carts at a time. And we're on our 4th load right now. So we have, we've given away somewhere around 1,800 of these carts since we started this program. The bottom right picture, you'll see there's larger cart with our same Town of Arlington hot stamped logo. That is an effort to expand our program to multifamilies. It's been harder and not as successful. Again, I think the multifamily residents feel very invited to use the drop-off program. And but we are using those buckets for public events when we offer composting at our town hall. If anyone's having either it's a school sporting event or any PTO event, we are offering food scrap diversion at those events and paying for it with our budget. So the picture on the top right is our recycling center. We don't collect trash, no transfer station, but we do have harder to recycle materials at our recycling center, and residents are instructed just when the gates are open, just to swing by and pick up their kit right there. So again, making it a really easy program to administer. Okay, can go forward, please. So in 2019, when I was at the end of trying to promote this expansion of both these programs, to both order a lot more carts for the subscription program and to also pay for the expansion of the compost program in the schools, because we have food scrap diversion since 2017 in all of our schools. That's 7 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and a high school, as well as expand the food scrap drop-off, the FIDO program. I had, at that moment, this is from one of those memos you write to your boss, that I thought that it wasn't until we were going to get 10% of our households that we were going to see any real drop in trash tonnage. And you can also see at the top that we had at that point already invested $100,000, not the $9,000 that I had originally naively estimated years before. This is not an inexpensive thing to run, but it's very satisfying. So if you could go forward again. So here's where the satisfaction comes in. You can see the timeline under the Feed FIDO program, that the locations were expanded in 2017, and we have over 1,000 users now. I don't expect that all of those people are still using it. I think that the drop-off program is a fabulous way for people to experiment with their households as to whether they can get their kids or their partners to participate, see what it feels like, see what it's like in the kitchen, see how much it smells or doesn't smell, see what their trash is like afterwards. And then, it only takes a couple of winters of not wanting to leave the house to go drop off your food scraps to decide that it's worth the not very much money for the truck to come to your house. So in 2018, Black Earth Compost had 81 customers. Now they have well over 2,000. So we're at 12% households that are participating in the curbside program. So I'm so grateful again to those residents who are willing to pay for this. And they are really showing us that food scraps are heavy in our trash, because right now we have already reached our 2030, the town's 2030 goal, which is for the solid waste master plan, which is to be 30% below what our trash was in 2008. So I don't know that it's all food scrap diversion that's helped us get there. I think that we have had some good partnerships with our trash haulers as well, to be sure that we're not taking too much trash. And our recycling program, especially the drop-off program, is diverting a lot of material as well. But I have to say that it was Mike Orr in Cambridge who said, you really aren't going to see the numbers of your trash come down for a while. And he was really right. And I really hope that we can expand the program townwide someday, but we're in the bid process right now. And I can tell you that it's just not feasible right now. So as an aside, I would be very supportive, don't tell my boss, of universal or statewide ban, and just give us some push as municipalities to have to divert this waste. It's very satisfying. The people who do it feel great. You see these green carts all over town. Bootstrap Compost and City Compost are also still working in Arlington. They use a 5-gallon bucket instead. And we feel lucky that there are a number of businesses working in Arlington. I think I have another slide. Maybe even 2 more. All right, that's my last slide. I'm shamelessly plugging my cute video. This was for a Valentine's Day. Give the gift of a compost kit to your loved one instead of flowers and candy. So you can find it on YouTube, and we have a lot of other videos about recycling in Arlington. And thank you for your interest. I have a few other things to say, but I'll wait till the Q&A happens.
Unmute. About that. Any questions or comments for Charlotte at this point? Again, you can use the raise your hand function at the bottom of in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, or type something into the chat here. Okay, so we'll keep on moving along here, and hopefully have a few more minutes at the end for questions. So with that, I will turn it over to Laura with the City of Boston Office of Food Justice, and a little bit different perspective on municipal involvement with reducing food waste. So we'll turn to Laura next.
Yeah, thanks, John. Again, Laura Alves, Manager of Strategic Initiatives at City of Boston's Office of Food Justice. It's really good to be here and hear the previous presentations. And I will pull up my presentation. Okay, all looks good. I will kick in. Yeah, as John mentioned, a little bit of a shift from the previous presentations as far as what I'll cover. So today, on behalf of Office of Food Justice, or OFJ, I'll touch on our background, the office's background, just a bit, to provide some context, and then to move into the City of Boston's food recovery initiatives, versus composting or other diversion methods. I'll cover the timeline of our initiatives, a food recovery assessment, collaborative food distribution hub and network, and then also a healthy food access through cold storage grant that we just launched in late September. So again, just to touch on Office of Food Justice's background, if folks aren't familiar with the office, our mission is to build a food system that is equitable, resilient, sustainable, and just. And in pursuit of that, we want to work towards expanding equitable access to nutritious food with respect to affordability and accessibility, and really promoting environmental sustainability and resilient food production. Oh, too fast. Per that mission, the Office of Food Justice, and I guess you could consider our sister office, which is, or sibling office perhaps, is Grow Boston, which is the city's urban agriculture office. And I will also just, to point a mark in time, the Office of Food Justice was created in February of 2022 under Mayor Wu. and previously was known as, or was formerly, the Office of Food Access. But yeah, going back, mission into goals, our office, along with Grow Boston, created 4 goals, and identified 4 major goals that will allow our work to have a bigger collective impact on the food system. So you can see goals around procurement, food procurement, around food production. And I want to focus on goal 3 here, which is to increase food recovery from public and private institutions and strengthen pathways to connect food insecure residents with fresh, healthy, recovered food. So from this goal, moved into creating some strategies to ladder up to this goal of increasing food recovery, or increased food recovery. And preliminarily, the office developed some strategies again towards that goal around reducing food waste from public and private institutions, supporting coordination, identifying infrastructure gaps. I'll say on the whole, I'm just touching on things pretty light, just I know we're gonna kind of move rapidly through. So again, I'll have a high touch to everything, but so we again came to a place of mission, goal, strategies, but ultimately what even, we weren't even sure of what the picture of wasted food in Boston was, and also the food recovery potential for the city. And so had been able to get the support of the National Resources Defense Council, who did some estimates for the city around wasted food in Boston, and also around the food recovery potential. So you can see here, there's 130,000 tons of wasted food in Boston annually, and it's split by sector. No surprise, pretty much, with the residential sector contributing here 46%. And I appreciate, John, your notes around the shifts MassDEP is making towards smaller generators. And us as a city, and us as an office, are new to engaging sectors outside of residential. Our counterparts at the Public Works Department are the ones that are doing all the good work around things like the curbside collection program. So these data or numbers are just, a beginning for us to start to get an understanding of the landscape. And then National Resource Defense Council, or NRDC, also did a food recovery potential. So looking at sectors where maybe the opportunities for capturing healthy surplus food. The dark blue lines are a more realistic projection. The hatched blue lines are kind of if we were in a kind of perfect scenario, all things going for us in support of maximum capturing. So yeah, I also just want to quickly mention the fact that 44% of Bostonians experienced food insecurity in 2023. So right, this two sides of edible healthy food that is going to waste, but also in a position where our residents are struggling to stay and to be food insecure. So moving towards the initiatives piece, I wanted to just move through a timeline as far as our offices, and even previously movement with the city, as far as food recovery and how it's living in the work. So taking back to spring of 2022, our environment department did some research on the local food recovery ecosystem. In January of 2023, it was the first time there was a position dedicated to food recovery. That actually is the position I'm holding, wearing a few hats, but dedicating a decent amount of time to working on food recovery. April of 2023, as I just went through, our office in Grow Boston made a strategic plan. So that really gave our Office of Foundation. And then in May of 2023, those graphs I just showed you were produced then by NRDC, and we actually signed on for a city partnership with them. It's as part of their Food Matters initiative, where they have a number of city cohorts that they support with technical assistance. So we were very appreciative of signing on in a partnership with them. In June of 2023, through that initiative and partnership and support, we were able to go through to a city cohort participation at a study tour of Milan Food Hub. I was very lucky to attend that, which really shaped some of our thinking around a collaborative food hub in the context of Boston, which I'll get into a little bit later. August of 2023, excuse me, those estimates came to be, I got ahead of myself. Our city partnership was in May. Those estimates of the food, wasted food and food recovery potential came in the summer of 23. We started a food recovery assessment, getting all the pieces together in March of 2024. And I will say, as this month, we are hoping to publish a report very, very soon. But I will drill down into the food recovery assessment soon. And then around that same time, March 2024, there was a specific real estate opportunity that came to be, which had a lot of cold assets, refrigeration assets in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston that moved into motion an exploration into what a collaborative food distribution hub and network what could be. And I'll note that in that same month that the Boston City Council shifted American Recovery Plan Act funds from composting to a hub. So that's a way that the city has been able to resource this exploration. And I'll also drill down into that exploration in a little bit. And then capping off now, or right around now, September through December, we're running through our Healthy Food Access Through Cold Storage grant. So the food recovery assessment, we had an objective around evaluating the food rescue landscape in Boston, and we really wanted to spend time or to gather and research to identify interventions by the city to the city's food rescue ecosystem to improve effectiveness, responsiveness to community needs, and to reduce wastage of surplus food, revealing and quantifying physical virtual infrastructure, identifying barriers to increasing access to rescued food. Those are some of the goals of that assessment as well. I'll touch on the phases of the assessment. We did a pre-work phase, which was going to city agencies and other groups such as food recovery organizations and just giving them a briefing of what we wanted to try to accomplish with this assessment. We then went through the procurement processes of getting a consultant and a community coalition on board with contracts. The community coalition is a group called Vital Connections and supported by health leads who did this work. And it was really important because they were so interconnected and knew our communities. And so it was beneficial to have them do a portion of engagement for the assessment. So of course we had our research phase in phase one. Kicking that in, we also did a convening with a number of key stakeholders, and we did a roundtable again, talking about what our objectives were around the assessment, presenting the folks with those estimates that I again showed a bit ago, and then really looking towards those stakeholders to help us determine our research questions that would be interwoven throughout our assessment. The next phase was an engagement phase done by the consultants and the community coalition. I will say OFJ did a few interviews as well, but in that engagement phase, it was engaging beneficiaries, food pantries, and other food distribution sites, engaging food rescue system actors such as food rescue organizations and food donors, and also getting a pulse on collection systems and a vision around food recovery on the whole. And all of that research is to culminate and has culminated in a report of the synthesis of and recommendations. The report includes 12 or so recommendations with some sub-recommendations within that. And we also reconvened our key stakeholders in September. And as I said, we are on the tail end of getting everything in place to be able to share that report out more widely. And I wanted to just, actually gonna take forward. Oh, I wanted to just touch on the number of folks that were engaged. We, of course, wanted to make sure that anything that came through this assessment was really baked into voices of who's on the ground. So at the end of this engagement phase, was almost over 200 stakeholders that were engaged. The highest number, 184 end users of food distribution programs and food pantries, and then through surveys, interviews, and focus groups, again, we had over 200 stakeholders engaged. So that was a pretty robust set of feedback that again led up to the recommendations. And then those recommendations fell into about 5 categories around incentives, education and awareness, permitting and policy change, funding, resources and infrastructure, and convening and value chain coordination. And I'll say the incentives were really put forth around incentivizing food donation, developing programs that offer financial incentives and public recognition for food donors, coupled with enhanced educational resources on the benefits of food donation. And education and awareness in that category came up as far as launching campaigns to educate food surplus generators on the importance of food donation and ensure all stakeholders are aware of best practices in food safety and handling. I will say that the state's organics waste bin definitely came up as a education opportunity. So we will kind of see how we incorporate that into any of the office's work upcoming. Also, you'll see permitting and policy change. We heard some challenges that, in particular, food pantries have around health permits through the city's inspectional services department. So, if there's ways that we can ease that process, that there's recommendations around that. Offering again, educate and includes education components as well. Funding, resources, and infrastructure. Mobilizing funding to support infrastructure improvements such as refrigeration, transportation, and storage facilities, which are crucial for scaling food recovery operations. And we were lucky enough through those ARPA funds that I mentioned prior that City Council shifted. That's what enabled us to do the grant program that I'll touch on. And I will say, as far as next steps, we're thinking through ways of when we can publish our report, how we will distribute that report, prioritizing the recommendations. As I said, there's 12 recommendations with sub-recommendations. So we'll have to work through sequencing and, based on capacity and resources, what we can move through and when, and right into implementing the recommendations. Collaborative Food Distribution Hub and Network. This is an initiative that has evolved very much over time. Again, the visit to Milan was a seed planted as far as what could something like what Milan is doing around its hub and model, where there's a central location where there's food that's donated, recovered, and purchased. And how that is at the hub, and then how folks come to the hub and access it, or how it's transported out of the hub. So again, a very particular opportunity came up in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, where there was a very an ideal warehouse space that could be used for public good, a public good opportunity where it also had space for receiving, storing, packing, staging, and distributing food. It was a real collaborative opportunity where community-based food access partners could come together to share the storage space. And then it really is an opportunity around increasing fresh, perishable food. And that would be through citywide distribution by community-based food access partners and connecting to a choose your own food style space. I will say, again, back to this Milan model, they had almost a grocery store type experience for end users. And in that vein, individuals were able to decide, if they had a cultural relevant option in front of them, they could choose that. So that's something that this hub and network will be, again, trying to explore what this all looks like. It's very much in a planning and design phase right now. And I'll just state again that the city is in a position that we've been able to resource the warehouse itself. And we have been in the planning process along the way, and this planning process and implementation will continue through 2026 at least and beyond. So the money piece is more so the seed money to then these community-based food access groups will have to keep this model running. And the last initiative I'll touch on is this healthy food access through cold storage grant. In part, the information that came from the assessment, we were gaining the understanding that cold storage is really a linchpin to being able to scale and offer fresh, healthy food, in part fresh food that is recovered. So the purpose of this grant is to expand refrigeration and freezer space to ensure food is fresh, safe, and available to Boston residents, and to enable the storage and distribution of perishable food, including recovered and donated food. Again, our funds were from ARPA. It's a $500,000 program in totality, awards between $5,000 and $95,000 per grant. And the eligibility are nonprofits that grow, collect, transport, store, process, distribute, and prepare food or feed people. And that these organizations serve one or more neighborhoods in Boston. So that deadline for that grant is this coming Wednesday. Awardees will be notified in mid-November. We look forward to those applications and really, again, supporting this type of barrier, again, that barrier as far as having the ability to have cold storage and how that then can enable the offering of fresh food, including recovered food. So I will end it there. We are really kicking in as far as you could see from our office's start in 2022 to working foundationally to moving initiatives forward. We're kind of feel like we're definitely moving in getting more mature. But generally, all of any information that we would have around food recovery would be on our webpage, which I've listed here. In all, we all, I'll say, have yet to really flesh out a food recovery content. So that's in the works, especially as we are due to release our report this month, hopefully. So I'll stop sharing. I know we have about 5 minutes left, so I hope I don't take up too much time to limit Q&A, but thank you.
All right, thank you, Laura. And I think the food rescue and donation infrastructure, that's something I didn't mention specifically, but MassDEP has awarded several grants in that area to food rescue and donation organizations, and I believe there'll be some more of those coming. So it's kind of a really exciting sector to see what's going on there. Obviously, not every community has the scale that Boston does. But it's really interesting to hear what's happening in Boston in that regard. So happy to open it up for either questions for any of our speakers, or if Charlotte or Jan, if you want to show your video again, if you have any additional thoughts from your perspective to try to tie things together. I'd welcome hearing more from your perspectives at this point as well. I do see one question in back here. With the goal of being smaller community-based composting sites and facilities, what is the expected use for the end product if there is no market for the material? Additionally, what is the stance on food scrap entering the sewage system through garbage disposal? So the first, my hope would be for community-based compost sites that those be operated in a way that the compost could be used locally. So one version is, setting up a composting site at a community garden or something like that, where there's the opportunity to use the output from the compost in the community. Relative to food scraps entering the wastewater system, so that's come up for us a lot along the way. So the food waste disposal ban is simply a ban on disposal of food material in the trash. So relative to food material going into the wastewater system, that's really governed by wastewater treatment system operators, and and their stance about how whether or how they want food material going through the collection system. I know Massachusetts Water Resources Authority has spoken a little bit about that and being okay with that. But I know another component is simply food material building up in sewer pipes, and that could be problematic. So if that were to grow, that could be problematic. Our approach has been to really try to drive material going to other uses like food donation and rescue, composting, anaerobic digestion. But that's certainly an element of the food waste management system. We do know a lot of food material goes into the wastewater system. I don't know how much, but we certainly know that's part of the management system. Any other questions or comments, or Charlotte or Jan, do you want to add anything from your perspectives to as we wrap up here?
Well, I'll just say that I wanted to also give kudos to CET and the Recycling Works for working with, we had a middle school student who initiated a town meeting warrant article and successfully secured $5,000 for a restaurant collection pilot program. And it was great to work with Recycling Works and Center for Ecotechnology. So those resources are out there, and as we all strive to find additional ways to get help for our businesses as they're working to either be under enforcement, but also voluntarily willing to do this for their customer base, for the marketing opportunity, and for their own mission as a business. I really think those resources are invaluable.
Thanks. That's good to hear. I do know that Recycling Works has worked on kind of a locally focused basis in a number of communities around the state. They've done some of this in Cambridge, Worcester, Taunton, the Lee Lenox area, where kind of working on a kind of local basis with a number of small restaurants, trying to get kind of locally based collection routes established for food scraps. So it's an interesting model for working with small businesses, and we'd love to support that more if there are other opportunities for that. All righty. Well, we're getting right to noon here, so I want to thank Jan and Charlotte and Laura again for joining us here today. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sharing both the presentations from today as well as the meeting recording up on our Organic Subcommittee webpage. And from my perspective, this is certainly not the beginning of these discussions, but a little bit of a turning point in some of our discussions around food waste as we start thinking about how can we effectively reduce and capture food material from smaller sources going forward. So this will continue to be an emphasis for us as we go. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us here today. Feel free to reach out if you have other questions or comments for me following the meeting, and we'll continue to be in touch as we go here. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us here today. And with that, I see no further questions or comments. I don't believe. I'll wrap things up here. So thanks again. Have a great day, everybody.